Okay, it always takes a minute to get back to all my videos, but where I left off with the last one, essentially Alex, so he passed away, and it was just a weird time, and I really didn't understand exactly what was going on. When I talked to his friend Blaine, he was like, yeah, he fell and hit his head, which just seemed weird, but I couldn't find anything in the paper or whatever about how he actually passed. Then I heard things that his mom was saying, like that he definitely wasn't on drugs, and I was like, well, that's weird because he told me that he was doing MDMA. So I was like, I don't know. I don't really know what happened. And I didn't go to the funeral out of respect for his girlfriend, which I regretted. I wanted to go. I felt like I should go, but I also just felt like I didn't belong there. And I don't know. Yeah, it was just under really weird times. But the weirdest part about it was because a few months prior to him passing, he started telling us, like I said, like the year before, he started telling us that he was like learning how to do all this stuff, and that he was going to come back and share all this stuff with us. Well, like maybe like 4 months or so before he passed, one of the last times I talked to him before I didn't talk to him after I got married, before I talked to him again, he was just being real weird. But he was like talking about how like once he passed, like, and we were like I don't know, we struggled, all of us struggled with depression and stuff like that. So like when he started talking about like potentially, just being depressed, or I don't know if he actually talked about killing himself, but like I think that's the impression some of us got, at least the impression that I got. But we didn't really like handle it with a lot of caution, really. I don't know. My generation, so many people, I mean, I've had like a dozen friends kill themselves. It's kind of just like this thing. So when people talk about it, you just become very accustomed to it, I suppose. I don't know. But when he was talking about not being here, he was like talking to us like we were all gonna outlive him, and he kept saying that he would like reveal himself to us in dreams, and he would show us that he had figured it out, that he had figured out how to get to the other side and then how to come back to this side, essentially, was what he was saying, and that like he was going to prove that like death isn't actually real and that it's just a transit. And I hadn't conceived any of those types of concepts prior. So like when he was talking about these things, they seemed very out there to me. Where like now it's like how I just normally talk about things. But at this time, I was still religious, and I really didn't understand these concepts outside of my own, limited perception of things. And I didn't know what to think about any of it. And like he especially would talk to me about this, about revealing himself to me in dreams, because we had always related on our dreams. But I don't know. And it was one of those things like, he's talking about like when he dies, like we're not really thinking about that being like anytime soon, so it just wasn't something I think that any of us were receiving like fully accurately for how he meant it, I suppose. But about a week after he passed, I had my first dream about him. I had several dreams about him pretty close to after he passed, and then for the course of just years following his passing, continued to dream about him, continued to communicate with him through dreams and just in an astral state. But the first dream, I was sitting on this bench, and he came and slumped down next to me on the bench, and he was in a hoodie, and he had his hood up. And it was like I was sitting there, and it was like it was a sunny day. It was real like light and bright outside. It was like a white bench. Everything was very quaint. And so he kind of stuck out like a sore thumb in his black hood. And he kind of was like that for me anyways. He had such a powerful disposition. Like he felt ancient. he seemed ancient, you know, like maybe you don't know, but I receive energies certain ways, and that's how I always received his. Was very, very powerful, very intense, very old, um, just known, you know, kind of thing, and like very kind of displaced. Yeah, there's so many different aspects to that, but like when I didn't fully understand these things, you know, back then, and when he sat down, like I didn't even look at him at first. I just knew that it was him. Like I felt him. I felt him sit down next to me. And I remember like turning and looking at him like this. And like, because I didn't believe it. Like it felt like him. I just knew that it was him without even looking at him. Like I only saw him out of my peripherals when he sat down, but like I just knew that it was him. But I remember questioning it and being like, can't be you. And so I kind of like looked at him, and he was sitting with like his hood, like just like this, like you could see just like a tiny bit of his eyes, you know? And I saw him just like smiling at me. I couldn't even see his face. I could just see his eyes, but I could see that he was like smirking at me. And I remember it sent chills through me, but it was good. I was so happy just to see him. But it was one of those things where I was just like, motherfucker. Like, and that's what it was. Like, he looked at me like, I did it. Like, I did it. Here I am. I told you I was going to be here. And I was just like, you're fucking insane. Like, you're insane. Like, this is crazy. Like, how are you here? I didn't talk to him or anything. I just remember all of those feelings and just that face that he made, which is crazy. Eventually, I'm going to have to get into how he's appeared to me. Crazy. That's crazy. Anyways, and then the second dream, I remember I was frantic trying to move. I had to move all of these different things. I think I was moving houses or something, but I had to move all of these different boxes, and like heavy boxes, heavy, you know, whatever random furniture and stuff like that. And it was a lot for me to do. And I had a timeline to finish it, and I wasn't finishing it. I was really struggling, and I was really, really frantic, really anxious, starting to feel overweight by it, you know. And all of a sudden he showed up, and behind him he had his best friend and then a couple of his other friends, and they just like immediately started going to work, just moving my stuff for me. And I like looked at him like I was just overwhelmed with emotions, because I was so blessed and, you know, filled with gratitude that he was gracious enough to be willing to help me. But I was also just like still so moved that he was there, that he just showed up. And I was like, how are you just going to show up when I need you the most? I didn't say anything to him. I think I just said thank you, but I was like crying, and he wrapped his arms around me and I wrapped my arms around him. And I remember the hug feeling. He had just the best hugs. He had been really, really heavy at one point, like 300 plus pounds, and had lost like, you know, 150 pounds, and or so, maybe more. And was not in like, he wasn't like, he didn't like work out or anything. He wasn't like in shape. He didn't come across to me as chubby necessarily, but not like skinny either, just like normal. But because he had been so heavy before, he was like very soft, and hugging him felt like you just like mold it into him, and you just like mold it around you, you know. And it was so warm and comforting, and he gave such wonderful hugs. And because he would really wrap his arms around you, he'd envelop you in himself. You would just feel his energy, and everybody remembered him for giving such wonderful hugs and for being such a kind person, and to be able to comfort in such an easy, sweet way in those ways. And I remember his hug just feeling like all of those things, and I was just like weeping in his arms. And I remember being like, okay, like I'll go and help these guys work. I can't believe they're doing all this work. And he's like, no, it's fine. They got it. Like, they got it. We can stand here and just enjoy each other. They'll take care of it. And I was just overwhelmed. And they did. Like in the dream, like they took care of everything. I didn't have anything to worry about, and it was nice. I just stood there. We didn't even talk after that. But when I woke up, like I had been revealed all of these different things. Like it wasn't actively happening in the dream. It was happening on an even deeper level, in a different dimension than even the dream had been in. But I woke up with all of these. I woke up a different person. A different person. I literally woke up a different person. I remember waking up that day and like the world was different. All of a sudden I realized that I was responsible for my life. Like I wasn't just my parents' kid. You know, I wasn't just the like the accumulation of my experiences. I wasn't just things weren't linear. I felt empowered in a way that I never had before. I felt very much aware of myself in a way I hadn't been before. I was becoming self-actualized. And I did not know how to explain that or where exactly it was coming from, except that just these very deep truths that I had yet to fully be able to process were becoming clear to me. And I just started looking at the world through very different eyes. At that point, I started studying and researching quantum theory, quantum mechanics, quantum physics. Really got into that stuff. I had already been into those things and been learning about those things, and doing it like on a scientific level. And at this point, I started getting into it, back into it again in like a very spiritual way. And I started looking at my relationship with my ex-husband differently. I started looking at my relationship with my family members differently. It was at that point really that I had already been pulling away from my family when I got married, especially I was like, oh no, I don't really even need them. You know, I had my husband, but at the same time, then when things were bad with my husband, I kept going back to my family. And at this point, I kind of started pulling away from that again, like altogether again. Because I just realized that there was, I didn't feel right about my relationship with them, or that there was something that I wasn't exactly like recognizing or seeing, or that I was being blocked from somehow. And it was slowly becoming an awareness to me. And at the time I started really kind of viewing it under the perspective of like the Christian brainwashing and the religious brainwashing and the just like a religious type abuse thing. I started pulling further away from the Christianity I had been raised with in order to recognize the hypocrisy that I had been being actively exampled and taught in regards to those things. So I started getting a different perception of stuff at that point in time. I mean, he really started through my dreams, just like revealing these different levels of reality to me that I was not receiving anywhere else. It was all just coming through my dream state and through my relationship with him and its memory. So there was little validity to it outside of those things. You know, studying quantum theory and mechanics and stuff like allowed me to put some sense of logic and reason, some sense of measurement behind a lot of those things, but most of it just straight didn't make sense. Most of it was just faith, I guess. And I was looking at it through the scope of like, well, I don't have to make sense of these things because I'm actively grieving and this is all just through his memory. I didn't view it like he had revealed himself to me to let me know, like, I really am actively right here coming back to you, coming back into your life, like through your dreams, the way that I told you that I would. I understood that was real, but at the same time, like, I wasn't willing to receive it that way yet. So, like, the way I kind of was viewing my relationship with him as it continued past his death was just that I and I even admitted, I was like, it's probably like a bit delusional, but like it's just the way that I'm able to process his memory, and like I'm just holding his memory close, and it just feels like he's still here with me, you know. But I didn't really fully understand things at that point. And then, like, well, later on that year, my ex-husband's, uh, she didn't adopt him. It was his best friend's mom, but she basically like was the main um, woman in his life. Like she had kind of raised him in ways that his mom never had. His mom had been pretty mentally ill, and off and on involved in the family, but often gone, just off doing weird stuff. And he didn't really have a relationship with his mom really at all outside of the trauma that she brought into his life growing up. So his best friend's mom was like his adopted mom in a way, you know, and she was the one that like would cook dinners and was kind to him and, you know, looked out for him and stuff. And she was my boss at the time. I was working for their family, managing a dog daycare, co-managing a dog daycare at the time. And she ended up passing away mostly unexpectedly. She had Crohn's and lupus, and the mixture of the two apparently is what ended up taking her. She just got really, really sick and didn't come back from it. But it took all of us by surprise. I think she actually knew that she was sicker than she was letting on. And at the same time, she was like, I mean, what am I going to do about it? I just got to keep working and doing my best. But once she passed, we were all taken aback by it. Obviously, especially her family, but especially my husband, because that was his mom. You know, like he felt more for her than he did for his own mom. And so that was like a really hard thing for him to process. But the thing was that when Alex had passed, I don't think I said this in the other video, when Alex had passed was the day before Valentine's Day. And that Valentine's Day, like I had prepared to have a meal and like dress up and like do all these nice things. He didn't My ex-husband didn't care about that stuff. Like he wasn't romantic about those things. He didn't want to celebrate any of that stuff with me. That was all me trying to do that for him. And when I found out that Alex had passed was on Valentine's Day, was the day after the evening that he did, or the night that he did. And so that, that the next day on Valentine's Day, I was like weeping in the bedroom when I found out. I was freaking out. And he came in and was like, "What's your problem?" And I was like, I didn't even know how to say it, but I was just like, "Alex passed away. You just found out that Alex passed away." And he was like, "Oh, that sucks." And then just walked out and like did not care. Didn't care. In fact, he complained later on about me still being like crying about it openly, because he was like, he didn't want to hear about it. He didn't care that I had that friend. He didn't like that friend. He didn't care. He just didn't care. He didn't care about any of my emotions ever to begin with. But especially this time, he was kind of cruel about it, to be honest. And it was whatever. I mean, I guess, expected him to be that way in different ways, just because of how our relationship was. But now this is like 3 or 4 months later when his best friend's mom passes, my boss. And I was bitter. I tried to be there for him, but like not the way that I really could have been, or the way that I've been able to be there for other people and stuff during their loss. Because I was mad at him and I was hurt by him, and like he kind of just completely shut down. He wasn't going to open up to me anyways, but I also didn't try to push for it. I wasn't actively trying to be there for him really either. I was trying to in different ways, but I was also cold in different ways, which I know was just hurting him worse. He hadn't been there for me, so I didn't want to be there for him. But at the same time, like, I did want to be there for him because I couldn't stand to see him that way. And I also, like, his entire, that was my boss. So, like, her entire family I was close to, and, like, to see all of them in so much pain and stuff was just really, really hard. And just then taking on the responsibilities of work and stuff like that. Like, I guess it gave me an excuse, something to focus on outside of my relationship with Randall. But at that point, our relationship really did. I think that was about the end of it at that point. I mean, he didn't even try to reach out to me about it. He didn't want me to be there for him. He didn't want anybody to be there for him. He just completely shut down. But like, that was it. You know, what little bit of emotion I was getting out of him, I no longer was getting it all. So that was pretty much the breakdown of our relationship. And later on, once he started, you know, a couple months later, once he had started like healing, you know, or just being able to process it, like kind of getting back to himself, drinking again and all, whatnot. He had like one day mentioned this girl at work to me, and I got the impression that he was talking to her with interest. But he let me know, you know, that he wasn't gonna try to pursue anybody because we were married. And I was like, well, if you're interested in somebody, then the only thing, like, it shouldn't be the marriage that's keeping you from pursuing them. Like, if that's really where our marriage has come to the point where like you actively want to be with somebody else, but you're not going to because you're married to me, and like now we're just going to have to be miserable with each other because we're married, like, then we don't need to be married. And I told him that. We had that conversation, but we didn't talk much to begin with. And like when I brought that up to him, I don't think he was expecting me to be willing to leave the marriage and to let him pursue other things. And I don't know. He didn't really add much to the conversation at that point. And I was like, well, you know, it's pretty obvious that the marriage is completely broken down at this point. And, you know, maybe that's just my perception since you refuse to fucking talk to me. So like, if this is something that you want, is to like have an actual relationship with me, like maybe we need to go to therapy, maybe we need some counseling, maybe we need to learn how to communicate better with each other. So if this is something you want, let's do that. Let's pursue what we can to make this relationship work. And if this isn't what you want, then, you know, I'll give you like the next 6 months even to make sure, you know, that this isn't what you want. And if it isn't what you want, then like I'll leave. You don't have to do anything, you know. But if this is what you want, try to have a conversation with me. Try to talk to me. Show me within the next 6 months that this is something that you actually want for us. He didn't do shit. He didn't want anything to do with me. Things just got colder and colder really at that point. So the next, you know, now it's March, like February, March of the following year. And now it's 2014. And I told him, okay, it's been 6 months. I'm going to just leave. I'm going to leave. He's like, where are you going to go? I was like, in my car. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to stay with you if you don't want to be with me. This is literally killing me. Like, this relationship has done nothing but just break my heart, you know, and I'm not helping you out either. You're just letting yourself drink yourself to death. At that point, he was already pretty skinny when we were, you know, married and stuff. But like he was 6'2" and had gotten down to 120 pounds. He was dying. Like he was not okay. And I was like, I can't just let you be like this either. Like you need to take care of yourself. I'm not going to stand in between you and doing whatever it is that you need to do that. I'm not going to let you use me as an excuse for why you're so miserable. Like, I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want you to be the bad guy. I don't want me to be the bad guy, you know? And we amicably separated, but continued to live with each other until April, when the lease was up. He was able to redo the lease just by himself. And at that point, I think he moved out, even to his own his own house, a rent-to-own house. And I moved into the car. But by March, we were officially fully separated. You know, we had talked about it. We'd gone through that. We'd spent a couple weeks, you know, making sure that that's what we were actively doing. And then we were separated March until April, technically. And so in March, I told him, like, as soon as we were officially separated, I was like, all right, well, I'm letting you know that I'm going to try to start talking to somebody else. Like, I don't have anybody right now. I'm going to be looking for somebody, but that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I need emotional connection. I want a partner that I can talk to. I want somebody I can actually share myself with intimately and romantically. And you've never offered me that. And I've just been, biding my time. But now that we're not together, that's what I'm going to look for. I told him I was just looking online. And at first he was fine with it until I actively did start pursuing a relationship, and he saw me like being happy with somebody else and, like feeling a way towards somebody else, and that upset him, and plus because it didn't take long for me to find somebody. It never takes long for me to find somebody. If I am willing to settle, I can find somebody any 5 fucking minutes. Like, that's just how it is. I know that it's harder for dudes. It's not my fault. But I mean, I did settle for someone. It didn't feel fully like settling because they seemed like a step up from the relationship that I had had with Randall, for sure. This person actually communicated with me, and we seemed to actually have a lot in common. When it came to communicating, when it came to, we had a lot of the same tastes in music. He was alternative, I was alternative. Like, at the same time, he was way more extreme than I was about any of those things. The reason that I fell for this guy is because of different things. And initially, it was purely shallow. It was purely, I thought he was very attractive. I liked that he presented himself like he was super edgy, and then I found out that he was actually a satanic priest. And at the time, that impressed me. I was attracted to that. When I had like kind of questioned him about it and like wanted to understand it more, the way that he kind of explained it was basically that he had been raised Pentecostal in the backwoods in Oklahoma by his parents, who were both evangelists. His grandpa had been an evangelist, and they were snake handlers. And he was like, so these are like crazy Christians. Like, these people are so crazy. And obviously so. And so like his proclivity towards Satanism came from just being in total rebellion against the extreme Christianity that he'd grown up with, which made total sense to me, honestly. And it appealed to me because it was kind of like the step up that I was looking for to get myself away from the brainwashing that I had recognized at this point, but did not know how to fully separate myself from when it came to, the religious upbringing that I had. So these things all very much appealed to me. And then he started, he would talk about theology, and he would talk about the occult, and he would talk about the mystery schools and these different things that like I had heard about. I had some knowledge of because of my brother, but I also hadn't really spent time talking to anybody in deep conversation about these theologies. And for him to be so well versed in them was very impressive to me and very attractive to me. And because I was very new to my own concepts of anything, I fell very easily into his concepts of things. But at the same time, I also didn't. Like, I think he believed me just to be completely naive and just buying into everything exactly as he, had set it up. But that wasn't what was going on. I was also seeking out my own knowledge and information to make sense of the things that he was telling me. Because there was so much about his theology that was so dark and so dense, and so there was a lot of it that was too dark for me. Like, a lot of it, I was like, okay, but that's not what I'm trying to be into. Like, I don't actually want to practice witchcraft, but I'm very interested in understanding it, and I was very interested in understanding things, but didn't actively want to practice a lot of what he was practicing. But at the same time, it really didn't take long for me to also start to like feel like he himself was like too religious for me. Like, I was like, I think I just want to get away from religion altogether. And this dude is basically just a Christian in the other form, like, you either have a cross or you have an upside down cross. What's the difference? Like, that's the way that I was viewing it. And he didn't like when I would express those different types of things. at all. But at the same time, he viewed me as being an idiot. You know, he thought that I was just, oh, happy, go lucky, not understanding anything, just looking for love in all the wrong places. Like, he really thought that I was just stupid, like the majority of the women that he spends his time with. So, you know, that are just, I want to be a witch because it's dark and I hate my parents and I'm going to cut myself because it's cool. Like, fucking insane people. Insane people. And it's not that I wasn't mentally ill back then. So, like, I get it. I did fall for those things, or I exampled those things in different ways. But thankfully, that's not who I really was. Um, you know, and this is unfortunately just part of my process for coming out of those things. But yeah, so I mean, we technically only dated online for, you know, maybe 6 months tops. Um, but in that time, like, I really thought that we had fallen for each other. Um, we were engaged heavily sexually, virtually, um, through, you know, phone chats and video chats and sending images and stuff to one another. We'd also like write poetry for one another and stuff. And that was something where, like, after